Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Big Three, all about anxiety, depression, and trauma. I'm Dr. RJ, licensed clinical psychologist, corporate burnout strategist, and the founder of Standard of Care Psychological Services, as well as Ask Dr. RJ Incorporated in Atlanta, Georgia. So, with over 20 years in the field, I have helped high performing professionals go from burned out to balanced using strategies backed by science and lived experience. Today, we're talking about the big three: anxiety, depression, and trauma. These are not just mental health diagnoses. In today's workforce, they are performance disruptors and culture killers. If your people are silently suffering, your profits are also suffering. And so this conversation is for my leaders, my strategists. Anyone will benefit from it. However, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in any leadership position, whether it's at your job, whether it's in your civic organization, whether it's in your church, wherever it is, this will definitely be helpful for you. Again, as we talk about anxiety, depression, and trauma, this information is great for anyone. But if you're a leader or a decision maker, this is your jam. So let's get going. So first, we'll talk about anxiety. I use, as a clinical psychologist, I still use the old school DSM for everything. There's a lot of research, a lot of time put into the DSM. And although it's not perfect, it is a guideline that helps us to be sure that we're not over diagnosing, to make sure that we're not turning normal life responses or regular brain reactions into a clinical or health disorder. So, anytime you hear me talking about anxiety, depression, trauma, anything like that, ADHD, chronic stress, it's based on science, not just pop culture or what's trending. And that's important to me because psychology is science as well as art. The art is the therapy part, it's how we use the science then to create a human relationship in order to decrease symptoms and improve quality of life. The sciencey part is how do we know what they are? How do we understand what the brain is doing? And how do we understand that in the context of an individual? So we'll start with anxiety. Anxiety is excessive worry for more days than not for 6 or more months. Okay, I'll say it again. Anxiety is excessive worry if we're talking about, let me start over. If we're talking about a generalized anxiety, a diagnosable anxiety, not just your own feelings, not a normal response to everyday reactions, but a diagnosable generalized anxiety disorder. These are the criteria: excessive anxiety and worry for more days than not for 6 or more months, difficulty controlling the worry, and three of these: restlessness, fatigue, concentration issues, irritability, muscle tension, or sleep disturbance. Now, if you all know me, you all know I don't play about my sleep. I track my sleep with my ring. I work with my clients on sleep. We talk about the science of sleep and sleep hygiene and why it's so important to give your brain and your body that reset every single night. We are doing a terrible job of prioritizing sleep and rest, which is the catalyst to a lot of other issues. But that'll be a different, I could go on about sleep forever. That'll be a different time. However, problem sleeping is a symptom of generalized anxiety disorder and so many other things. How this might look in the workplace. So, again, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a CEO, if you're a leader, a director, or any department, anxiety in your team, anxiety in yourself, anxiety and even in your own leaders might look like this: over checking emails, difficulty prioritizing, chronic over functioning, and Sunday scaries. And so let's talk about those a little bit. Over checking emails. I'm not a fan of email, so I'm a little bit biased. And when I say I'm not a fan of email, I'm not a fan of having my email up all day and I'm constantly checking. I think that email should be treated like a short meeting. And so designate a time during the day to check your emails, write your to-dos of or your action items if you can't do them right away, and then keep it moving. But anxiety can look just like being on teams, like over checking, almost obsessively checking to see if something is missed. Difficulty prioritizing looks like I feel like I'm busy. I'm busy. I have my laptop open all night until 11 p.m., 12 a.m. It's on my lap and still nothing's getting done. And so it's not that nothing's getting done, it's that the right things are not getting done. So there's overchecking emails, difficulty prioritizing, chronic over functioning. So it's this perfectionism like, am I doing this right? The imposter syndrome pops up when there is anxiety, and you'll notice it in just a lot of need for reassurance. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? Am I going to get fired? Am I going to get laid off? Do they really like my work? Are they setting me up for failure? And while I do know in the real world, sometimes this is true, more often than not, it's an internal experience. And then the Sunday scaries, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's on Sunday, you start to dread Monday. Your stomach may start to hurt. You may get a lot of call ins. If you're a leader or a physician, you'll get your call ins late Sunday night, early Monday, because it's like, I can't face this place any longer. Often, that's because of anxiety. In The Art of Balance, Authenticity, Relentless Rest, and Time Consciousness, one of my latest books, I teach professionals to schedule rest with the same urgency as meeting with the CEO. Because anxiety thrives in exhaustion, and a rested brain is a regulated brain. I'll say that again because I really love it. When I teach professionals to schedule rest with the same urgency, I teach them to schedule it with the same urgency as meeting with a CEO or with their leader or director, because this is the part you need to catch. Anxiety thrives in exhaustion, and a rested brain is a regulated brain. So you may be saying, Dr. RJ, all right, I hear you. This is me. What do I do about this? And if you're a leader, first fix it for yourself, right? Model it for your team, and then you can give them strategies as well. One strategy is time blocking. So block 15 minutes a day for restorative nothing. No phone, no tasks, just sitting still. For some of you who are already really good at this, you may be like, 15 minutes, I need more than that. For those of you who never do it, 15 minutes is going to be quite a challenge. And so you can work your way up to that. If I'm working with an executive who is going, 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 going like a hamster on a hamster wheel, we start in 3-minute increments of doing nothing, and then working our way up to 15 minutes daily. Notice the word restorative nothing, right? You're not just doing nothing, it's being intentional about restoring, filling yourself back up instead of just sitting there. So think about it like, oh, I just need to charge my phone real quick. You put that charger in, it's intentional restoration, it's an intentional nothing that you're doing. So think about how and when you can start your daily 15 minutes of a restorative nothing. Now, this is the deal. If you don't put it on your calendar, it's not going to happen. Somebody else will take that space from you. So you want to make sure that that isn't happening to you. Grounded team members make better decisions, and you want to think about, if your team has a chronic anxiety, it's going to show up everywhere when you walk in or when you log in. It's going to feel like a mess. Intuitively, your intuition will tell you this feels like chaos. That's how you know that anxiety is floating around your team. Not necessarily like the DSM diagnosable anxiety, but enough anxiety and worry that is not a normal response to a situation that is also impacting productivity and the wellness of your environment. Okay. Let's talk about depression. So the DSM criteria for a major depressive disorder. Depression has a huge section in here in the DSM because it there's so many types of depression. There's so many ways that it comes about. There are so many comorbid disorders that depression goes along with. I call depression and anxiety first cousins in the brain because they overlap. They do a lot of things together. They hang out together in the same spaces. And so uh, anxiety may trigger depression and depression may trigger anxiety. And so it's really important to have a licensed clinician, a licensed person help you distinguish between the two if you think any of these symptoms apply to you. So, major depressive disorder. It is depressed mood or loss of interest for 2 or more weeks, plus four of these: weight or appetite change, sleep disturbance, agitation, so irritable, everything gets on your nerves, fatigue, guilt, concentration issues, and suicidal ideation. How this may show up in the workplace: exhaustion, always tired, lack of joy. Everything is like, ugh, it's like there's cynicism. Everything gets on your nerves. Everything is, why are we doing this? Your face is always frowned up. You're just annoyed. Disconnection and quiet quitting. We heard that term quiet quitting come up after the pandemic, the quiet quitting. And you'll see more of that if depression is floating around in your team. Not necessarily diagnosable depression, but any type of depressed mood as it relates to daily functioning. So when we're talking about um, depressed mood or loss of interest, the time period is really important. If my clients tell me I'm not feeling like myself, I'll be like, well, how long has that been happening? And it's usually more than 2 weeks. 2 weeks can fly by. And so, really keep your eye on this. Obviously, causes and symptoms can be related to a plethora of things. It could be lack of vitamin D, it could be poor sleep, it could be a grief response, it could be just needing rest or time in nature, it could be spiritual exhaustion where you haven't done the things that you normally do to sustain you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about depression that is persistent and does not go away, even when you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing to fill yourself up on a regular basis. Okay. So, something to note is that we don't burn out from doing too much. We burn out from doing too much of what isn't aligned. Depression often reflects a loss of meaning. Again, I talk to my clients about purpose when they're burned out, when they're tired. Are you doing what fills you up? Are you doing what fulfills you? And even if that's not something you can get in a workplace, where else can you get that? What else will you do about it? It's not always feasible to get your fulfillment, and it may not be realistic to get your fulfillment from your job or your career. There may be other places in the community or in your home or in your organizations where your need or your purpose can be fulfilled, where you can have alignment. But if we're talking about in the workplace, um, the doing too much, we're good at doing tasks, doing things, but it really is about doing the right things. If you're doing the right things, doing the things that are meaningful to you, you won't feel burned out. Therapy, wellness workshops, speaking, retreats, conferences, all of those are meaningful to me. So I could go nonstop as long as I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do to fill back up, and burnout will never come. And I'll attest to that, that even if it's my busiest time of year, even if it's my sprint season, burnout does not come because what I'm doing is aligned with my values. And so, one way to check in with your team is to ask about their values. Is this work meaningful to you, or are you just here? I'm sure there are ways to ask where your team members will feel honest, or I'm sorry, will respond in an honest way. There are certain words you can use, or whatever your culture is at your place of work or in your workplace. Use those words, use that language. But you want to check in to see if it's meaningful because when things lose their meaning, then you'll see this joy, this lack of joy. Um, I'll say this, it also depends on the generation. Some generations feel like your job shows you that they care about you by giving you a paycheck, right? Like, you don't need all that extra. You go to work, you do what you're supposed to do, you come home, you get paid. Other generations feel like if I'm going to spend all of this time somewhere, it better have some meaning and some purpose if I'm spending most of my life away from my family with this particular thing. Neither of them are wrong. And so you want to check in to see if the work aligns with current values or if it's just busy work. And it's important to know if you're seeing some turnover, if you're seeing a lot of call outs, if you're doing FMLA, a lot of FMLA permissions, that's medical leave of absence. It could be related to a lack of alignment in your team or feeling like they're not valued. Those issues can actually trigger depression and anxiety. It's not a fake thing, it's not a cop out. They really can trigger feelings of depression and anxiety in the body, which can then morph into an actual disorder if it goes unchecked. And finally, trauma. Trauma also has a huge category in our DSM-5. I think trauma, the reason it's part of the big three is because it's a cultural thing now, pop culture thing to say, oh, I'm traumatized. Oh, this is trauma. Oh, my trauma is causing me to A, B, and C, and trauma, 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 trauma. And 90% of the time it's being used incorrectly. You can have a traumatic experience without having a diagnosable traumatic disorder or without having PTSD. So yes, some experiences are traumatic and they're subjective to the person. But if we're talking about real deal post traumatic stress disorder or something related to the science of diagnosable trauma, these are the criteria. You ready? You listening? First, there has to be exposure to trauma. Now, there is some research around what exposure to trauma means. Is it secondary exposure? Can you get exposure to trauma if it's not happening directly to you, but someone who you care about or feel close to, or someone who you've worked with or worked for? There's a lot of research around that. And yes, I do believe, and also the science believes that secondary trauma includes the exposure to trauma, which is why I tell my clients all the time do not turn the news on a loop over and over. Our brains are not meant to be exposed to trauma all day long, other people's trauma experiences, because your body will remember it, especially now that our TVs are super fancy, our screens are now that our screens are super fancy, our brain can't differentiate between what's actually happening, what's reality, what's in front of us, and what's just on the screen. So be very careful about what you are watching, listening to all day long on repeat on a loop, because you can then make yourself vulnerable for the symptoms of a post traumatic stress disorder or another type of trauma response. So you have the exposure to trauma. Then you have symptoms across four domains. All right, this is important. Four domains. Intrusion. Intrusion is like flashbacks or nightmares. Avoidance of reminders like, nope, I don't want to talk about that. No, I'm not driving down that street. It reminds me of this. No, I'm not wearing the color blue because the last time I wore color blue, this thing happened. Negative mood and thoughts. Remember, I told you depression is linked to a lot of other disorders. This is one of them. So, a negative mood, thoughts, and that may come across as guilt or detachment. I don't really care, whatever, or a lot of guilt, like all of this is my fault. All of this has to do with me. And then the fourth domain is hyper arousal. Everything startles you. It's you know how little babies haven't are just developing their startle response, and they're like every single second. Uh, that's what hyper arousal is like in an adult. You may have learned to hold it on the inside, but your body and your brain is always aroused, always going. That can show up as being irritable because your brain is tired from always going. Your parasympathetic nervous system is exhausted. And so then you don't sleep well. And there is a cycle of these ongoing things that can be symptoms of depression, anxiety, or trauma, which is why it's super important to stay healthy so that when these or if these pop up, we'll say, this is out of the norm for me. Usually I'm a good sleeper, but now this is happening. What this may look like in the workplace: emotional shutdown, cynicism, conflict avoidance, mistrust, fear of change, and anger over feedback. So let's say you have a work rating scale of 1 to 5, and you get a 4, and you're like, 4? As much as I do for y'all, you're gonna give me a 4? Um, so just keep that in mind as we're thinking about the workplace and leadership. Trauma alters the perception of time. Often, those who are experiencing trauma symptoms feel rushed while others feel frozen. What can help this in the art of balance is time consciousness, because time consciousness allows us to live in the present, to reclaim the present, to be one mindfully is the DBT term that I like to use. So, something you can do: ask yourself the 5-5-5 rule. Will this matter in 5 minutes? Will it matter in 5 days? Will it matter in 5 years? And then respond accordingly. I'll say this again: ask yourself, use the 5-5 rules as it relates to working with your teams, working within leadership. When you're thinking about your response, will this matter in 5 minutes? Will this matter in 5 days? Will this matter in 5 years? And then you plan your response accordingly. Okay, so hopefully this has been helpful. Something that's important to know is that psychological safety is really important. I know we use the term a lot, psychological safety, especially in work environments, but man, if there's no psychological safety and people are on edge, it's literally like coming in to a battle zone every single day. Not a lot of productive work or productivity is going to happen if someone feels like every day they're coming to a battle zone. It's kind of like that all my life I had to fight, and you're doing this like every single day at work. So, trauma informed leadership is able to retain top talent, right? Trauma informed leadership is able to retain top talent. You will lose your good people if you don't know the language to use, if you don't have the appropriate amount of empathy, if people feel like they're just a number, you will lose them. And then that creates turmoil and chaos for everybody. So let's do a recap, and then I'm going to love you and leave you. We're going to get out of here. The big three: anxiety, relentless rest calms the mind. Okay. So when you think about anxiety, relentless rest, having your sleep hygiene in place, that will calm the mind. If we're dealing with symptoms of depression, realignment restores joy. Okay. What matters to you? What are your values? Those are things to think about. Are you doing a lot of what matters to you, or are you doing mostly what matters to other people? If we're talking about trauma, not diagnosable PTSD, just trauma feelings, experiences, time consciousness will empower your presence. What do I mean by that? using mindfulness, staying in the moment, grounding yourself, experiencing nature, putting your feet on the ground or in the soil or reconnecting with nature. That will then remind you that you're right here, right now, what is happening, and it allows you to get some part of your power back so that you can move forward with action. Anxiety, depression, and trauma are the real quiet quitters, but we can interrupt the pattern. So, one way that leadership interrupts the pattern is that they bring in experts to talk about these things. Obviously, you're listening to me. I'm an expert. This is what I do. I'd love to work with you and your team. But beyond that, just start having the conversation. Talk about balance. Talk about work-life integration. Talk about what else is going on that people are bringing with them to work, or is it work that's causing these symptoms? It could go either way. Regardless, I always want to say the irregardless, and I know irregardless is not a word, but I feel like it gives like a little like irregardless. Okay, let me not do it because it's gonna annoy my it's gonna annoy some people. So anyhow, let me stay focused. Let's go beyond surface level wellness. Regardless of what's happening, wellness needs to be integrated into your team, into your workplace, into your organizations. Otherwise, you're not going to get all that you should or could get from your team's qualifications, from their talents, from their time. And so, if you are a leader, a director, a CEO, a decision maker, I want you to actually let me pull up the number so you don't have to try and find it. I'm gonna give you a way to contact me. Okay, here we go. Okay, there we go. That makes it easy. So if you are a decision maker, just text strategy 3 to 833-451-4258. Text strategy 3 to 833-451-4258. And let's just have a conversation, just a regular conversation. What's going on with your team? What are the challenges? What are you facing? Is the big 3 impacting you, impacting productivity, impacting just the way that your team works? And we'll go over some strategies and take it from there. So that is all, everybody. I'm gonna love you and leave you. Um, Always feel free to follow me on Instagram at Ask Dr. RJ, AskDRRJ. I have a lot of fun on Instagram, but the reason I'm asking you to follow, not just so I could have um, popularity or numbers. I have a lot of friends. I don't necessarily need that, but the content is really, really good. There's something every single day that will be useful to you in one way or another. All right. Well, that's it, y'all. I'll see you next time.
Okay. Next slide. All right, who wants to read this out loud for me with enthusiasm? Thank you.
Hustle,
Yes.
sometimes necessary, significantly overrated. When done too often without rest, can lead to burnout and overall life dissatisfaction.
Thank you. I picked the right one. So, this is the thing. When I was growing up in Newport News, hustling is a part of the culture, right? You work hard, you hustle. It had a lot of different meanings. And so, like a lot of you, it's like when you hustle, that's how you know you're doing good. But that doesn't really work. So let's talk about that some more. Uh-oh, am I going the wrong direction?